Hello, hello. Can you see and hear me, I hope? Please let me know. I think so, because I see captions on the light side. So I hope so. Yay! All right, so tonight, my name is Heather. I am here from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. I am here to teach you professional knotting with bullion. So Corvus should be here because this was something that she wanted to learn. And I'm going to be knotting a pearl bracelet with a bullion finish. I am going to knot my white pearls on red cord tonight because learning to knot is easier to do if you can see the cord against the pearls and you don't want to use black for your first experience because you can't see the cord against itself all that well. So I'm going to be knotting. I already have all my tools over here, and I've got I don't have hypo cement, but I will grab that or ask someone to bring it to me later. I don't need that till the end of the project anyway, so it is okay that I don't have it right now. So let's look at what tools I need for this. Okay, not a keyboard. I don't actually need a keyboard, which is nice. So, bye Linda! So I need a cutter of some kind. These are my wire cutters, but they can... Oh no! Lori, something that I've done that has helped a lot is work something up under the cap, facing away from me, obviously, but if you can just stretch out the cap just a little bit, then you can usually pop it off. But I also have greater than average hand strength, which is a nice superpower for a professional jewelry maker to have. Oh, good vibes. That's awesome. We want to see. And this is really dark. I don't know why it's so dark. All right, so I'm using larger pearls because I want to be able to get through the bracelet in a reasonable amount of time and not bore you all first. Oh, wow, a bulldog crossed with a bull mastiff. Oh, we need pictures for sure. I have 4 pearls, 2 for each end, that have been specially drilled with a larger hole size. You can see that they are larger. Unfortunately, there was a blood sacrifice made for this, so everyone send Allison some love because she suffered for her art today and she's not even on the stream. I am using a griffin silk for knotting today. You can use a lot of different materials for knotting. Griffin silk is one of the easiest to use. This is 100% natural silk. It is a German brand, so it comes in a whole bunch of different sizes. I already know that size 5 is the correct size for my project today. You can see size 5 is, other side, size 5 is 0.65 millimeters in actual measurement, and they are very consistent about their sizes. So size 5 is a size 5 is a size 5. It comes in a bunch of different colors, and you get 2 meters of silk on a card with a needle already attached. So the needle being attached makes it really convenient. Perfect, Corvus. I love it. Timing is everything. Yay! I can't wait to look. So you get 2 meters, which is enough to do a lot of necklaces, or I don't mean like you can knot several necklaces out of 1 2-meter silk. When you are embarking on a knotting project, you want to start with at least 3 times the finished length that you want. The more beads there are means the more knots will be tied and the more cord will be used. Another thing to think about is how big the cord is. So a size 8 will use more cord length in a knot than a size 5 would, because the sizes go up. You know, as it goes up in number, it goes up in size. So you don't want to plan a nice long knotted piece. You know, you don't want to plan a 4-foot long knotted piece on a card of silk, because there is a slight chance, if you have exactly the right bead, cord, knot size combo, that you can get a 40-inch necklace out of a card of silk. I've done it with fairly large pearls, and the reason it worked for me was because I had the ability to stop whenever my design was done. So when I ran out of silk, I was done. I didn't use quite all my pearls, so I had a pair for earrings, and it worked out great. When you are knotting something that's longer than, say, 2 feet, which is, because 2 meters is about 6.5 feet, so longer than 2 feet, you probably want to be on the safe side and plan with spooled silk or nylon or knotting cord or whatever it is that you want to use. I'm using Griffin silk tonight because that is easier, and because we have scraps of it, and it's this just, you know, a good take it off the wall beginning to any knotting project, which is great. So I also have, obviously, my pearls, my drilled pearls, and I've got my clasp already, because we're going to begin with the clasp on, unlike most times that we knot. So this is medium French wire, or bullion, and it is a tiny little coil of wire, and you want to be very careful with it because it is tiny little wire and it is hollow. So if you squish it, you will squish it. It's not like a slinky. It looks and feels like you should be able to stretch it, and it's so tempting, and just don't do that, because there are different sizes of bullion. So bullion comes in fine, medium, and heavy in most wire colors, or at least medium in more. There are a couple of sizes that you can get in some colors that are smaller than the fine and larger than the heavy. But small or fine, medium, and heavy are typically what most people use. So, Blue Jay, hello! How are you? Good to see you again. All right, so when I cut the bullion, I'm going to use my wire cutters, and you can cut it. It's so small that you actually can cut it with wire cutters, or you can use snips or scissors. You might not want to use the very, very tips of your snips or scissors, just in case it nicks them at all, but it is very fine wire. So I'm going to cut, and I don't have a ruler up here, so I'm going to cut about half an inch or so. That's a little less than half an inch. Oh, can someone turn off the music, please?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I did not have to put my hands in lotion gel, which is good. So my evening is going better than yours, it sounds like. All right, so I'm going to start with this card of silk by unwrapping the entire card, or the entire silk from the card. And silk, before you use it, you must stretch it. And the reason you must stretch it is because silk has a natural elasticity to it. My other tools I'm going to be using are tweezers, which I'm about to use to put my little pieces of bullion in safe place here. I've got my little box of things. And I've got an awl, just in case I need to get a knot out. There are people who use an awl exclusively for knotting. They will use the awl to place their knots. We have found that for us, it works better with tweezers because you can both place it and hold it with the tweezers. So silk has a natural elasticity to it, and we want to pre-stretch it because the Griffin silk has also been twisted to keep the wire needle in place. So you can see I've got my wire needle. Here is the little spot where the needle and the cord comes together, and it is actually doubled over just like any other needle. You just have to make sure that you stretch it extra, because silk, already elastic, twisted silk, much more elastic. So you can see, and I'm going to show it on the face cam, and let me just switch over to face cam because this is big and I cannot do it in front of me because that doesn't use the right muscles. So, got it. All right, so you can see that the silk it has corners, and the corners are not the issue. We don't care if it has corners, but the corners are going to be your indicator that the silk is stretched. So I'm going to start with the end opposite the needle. I'm going to wrap the silk around my fingers, just enough to hold it. There's no particular way to do it perfectly or anything like that. You just need to grip it so you can hold on to it. It doesn't really matter how. And I do the same with my other arm. And what I'm going to do, and you can't really see all of it because I'm too big for the camera and I cannot back up, but I'm going to hold it like I'm shooting a bow. So I've got my right arm for me out like I'm about to shoot. And then my left arm, and that's going to stay stationary. I do not want to pull things out in front of me because pulling things out in front of you and stretching way out here uses completely different muscles. So if you're holding it close to your body, like you're shooting a bow, you're using the big muscles across your chest, your pectorals, and that is a muscle that you have whether you work out or not, because you don't have to work to have those. Those are the muscles that help you stand up and sit up and that sort of thing. So I am terrible at working out at a gym because I'm always tired when I'm not working because work is tiring and I'm old. And so I'm going to hold this so I can use the nice big muscles across my chest. And everything is in the same plane as my body. I don't have my hand sticking out in front of me or anything like that. So you will see that my left hand is actually going to move quite a bit. So you ready? Let's go. So the indicator that you have stretched your silk will be that you do not have any corners left. It will also change its texture a bit. So I don't know if you can see that it's a little bit stiffer right after being stretched. And that is a good indicator that it has done what you want it to do. Now, that doesn't feel good. I'm going to tell you right now, stretching silk on your fingers doesn't feel good, but I have calloused fingers from doing this forever. So it doesn't feel good, and I don't love it for a few seconds, but it's a pain that goes away very quickly and doesn't leave a mark. So now I'm going to tie I'm not going to tie a knot. I'm going to tie a slip knot. So don't get bogged down in how to tie a slip knot, but I'm going to start out with a slip knot. So I'm going to make a loop, and then I'm going to pull the middle of my cord through that loop and tie a knot around that loop. And the point of that is to make a knot that does that, where you can pull both ends. Well, now you can know how to listen to them and tie one. So a slip knot is very, very useful as the beginning for quite a few things. It's the beginning for crochet. It's the beginning for something where you don't want to have anything where you don't want to have a permanent knot there. It's the beginning when you cast on in knitting, especially in long tail. Lots of different things you can do with the slip knot, because this knot will also move actually if you pull the short end of it. So to untie the knot completely, you will just pull both ends. That's hilarious, Blue Jay. All right, so I'm going to begin with stringing 2 pearls. the two of the pearls that have the bigger holes. I think the face cam is still reversed. I don't know. I'm confused by the face cam, honestly. I'm not used to sitting over here. I had a canopy bed as a kid, and my Barbies did a lot of trapeze tricks. They were really circusy Barbies. So I am putting the bullion on. I'm going to pull it carefully over where the silk and the needle meet. And I'm going to go through the base of the toggle. It doesn't really matter which, but toggle, if you have a toggle clasp, if you are doing a graduated strand and are just going to stop whenever you get to the right length, as I am about to do, you want to make sure that you start with the toggle, because that means you can test whether the toggle end fits through your beads or it fits through the ring on the other side. All right, so I've got my bullion on, I've got my needle, and I'm going to go back down through the pearl. That's first, and I'm going to pull all the excess silk out of the way. And usually you want to make sure that you leave the excess silk on the table when you are knotting, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Right now it doesn't matter so much. So I've got my bullion in a little loop, and it's very important at this point that I tighten my loop. It is a little protector, so when you're knotting and going back down through your last beads, you don't have anything between your silk and the cord, or the clasp rather. So you want the bullion there to protect it. Now, bullion is not made of karat gold or anything like that. And yes, there are absolutely going to be times when your bullion, even on a really expensive pearl necklace, is going to start becoming discolored. Chances are good, if that is happening, that your necklace needs reknotting anyway. So don't worry about the quality of your bullion, because it really just doesn't come in karat gold. You just use gold colored. You get the best, and it comes in a lot of different shades of gold, so get the best one to match the best you can. And it really is a bit of a crapshoot. So I am going to tighten this bullion, because now it's a very clean loop, and it's going to look a little less clean after I do this, but you want to do it, because if you don't, your bullion is not going to be as strong as it could be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on the end, and I want to make sure that my clasp still moves. I could have made my bullion a little bit bigger, bit longer, but this will still work. So it's not going to be the easiest thing in the whole world to fasten, but that's okay. It'll work just fine. So I've got now my tightened bullion, and I'm going to tie my knots. So I'm going to do a half hitch where I make a little loop underneath or above. It really doesn't actually matter as long as you are consistent. I'm going to pull the long end through. I'm going to tighten that, pulling back toward the pearl and the clasp, and I'm going to do that one more time, because when you tie a half hitch, it's only a half until you get through at least twice. Sorry, I'm taking it out of the camera because this part is awkward. All right, so I've got my knot. I'm going to tighten it. All right, so now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go down through the next pearl. And this is the reason why we have these pearls drilled out, so they have larger holes. You can also do this without drilling your pearls by having metal beads or some other bead at the end that has a larger hole. And I did do that style of knotting in a previous tutorial that wasn't that long ago. Both of the ends are actually facing the same direction. Both are facing away from the clasp. So I've got two ends going away from the clasp. And I just undid my slip knot because at this point I'm not going to tie my knot yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie that after I finish my knotting. So now the second step for professional knotting is we are going to pre-string the beads. And I'm not going to pre-string the last two beads. I'm just going to pre-string these. And I'm not going to string all of them because my knotting is going to add some length. And since I have extras, if I end up with a bead that is going to make it fuzz up at the end and be very, very difficult to get over that little connection point at the needle, you don't want to stress that point because we're going to ask it to pull through something later, and we want to make sure that it still feels like it when we get there. So since I have extra pearls, I'm not going to force any pearls on here. I can just put them aside if they don't fit. That one doesn't fit as well, so I'm going to put that aside. It is extra. That one too. Some of these are pearls that have been mixed in from other strands. And another problem that I'm running into is that this strand has already kind of fuzzed up the end of the connection point just a little bit. But I've got plenty of pearls here, so I'm not worried about this changing the length a whole lot. Now, these are fairly irregular oval / rice shaped pearls. So again, if you were is because you can see what I'm doing with the cord against the pearls, because it's not ideal not to be able to see that. All right, so the way you knot with pre-strung pearls is I'm going to make a loop, pull the working end underneath. I'm making a circle. I'm going to pull the working end up and over, dropping it through. So now I have tied a knot in my cord. Now I'm going to take my tweezers and I'm going to put them through the loop that I just made and place the very tips of my tweezers right on top of the pearl or wherever I want my knot to go. So you want to make sure that it's nice and tight, because if it's not nice and tight, there's nothing you can do. This is where your knot's going to be. And the farther up on your tweezers you're gripping, the more space you're going to have between where you want your knot to be and where your knot actually is. So you do want to grip at the very, very, very tips of your tweezers. So now that I've got my knot placed around my tweezers, I'm going to do it in front of my face. I'm going to think about pulling straight up on my silk, but I'm going to cheat slightly across my body, which works regardless of which hand you're knotting with. So I'm cheating slightly across my body because what I want to do is I want to tighten this knot on my tweezers as much as I can before I pull it off my tweezers. And you'll notice that I did not open my tweezers as I pulled it off. I just kept them closed and pulled it off. I do not have a Vulcan death grip on this or anything like that. I'm not trying to hurt my silk. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I just want to make sure I'm still holding it, because if you open your tweezers, you're creating a little bit of extra space. Now, if I want to look at my knot, I don't really need to, because again, I do this a whole lot. So I know that this knot is in the right place. But if I want to look at it, I am not allowed to pull on the end of the silk. And the reason for that is because, thank you, Keiko. I mean, it's good for my own neurospicy brain. So the reason I don't want to do that is because that creates extra space between where the knot is and where you want it to go. So what you can do is put it in your hand, put it in the palm of your hand, and you can pull it up as close to your face as you need to. What you're looking for, and I'm going to do a little interpretive dance in the camera, an overhand knot is not straight up and down. It has a bit of an angle. And when you tie your knot, the bottom part of the knot should be touching your pearl. The top part doesn't have to be. It can't be. That's just not how the knot is configured. So you need to make sure that the bottom of the knot is touching. And now is your chance to make sure that the bottom of the knot is touching, because if it isn't, and you do this next step and tighten it more, that's it. You have no way to get it out. That's just where it lives now. So you can get it out, but what you're going to do if you do, and I'm going to put this on face cam so you can see my full judgy face. If you get it out, I know it's really, I'm pretty judgy. We have visual proof of this on the Beading Dreams. So if you tighten your knot and you decide after you tighten your knot that it is in the wrong place, what's going to happen if you try to move it is you are going to end up with frayed silk if you are able to get your knot out, possibly broken silk if it doesn't go well. And if you retie your knot, silk has a memory to it, which is why it had the corners when you took it off the card of silk. So if you have tied a knot in the wrong place, it is very difficult to tie it again in the right place. Ask me how I know. But if you do tie a knot in the wrong place and you're making a bracelet, chances are good it's better to just restart. I mean, there's no shame in restarting. Just make sure that you continue to have enough silk, which would be about at least 2 feet. The silk is also neurospicy. Keiko is not wrong. So I have my knot in the correct place. And I haven't tightened it yet. So if I did need to get this out, I still could. But what I'm going to do to tighten it is not what you think. Some people think you're going to put the tweezers on and push it down. But you don't want to do that. So we're going to actually push with our thumbnail or the next pearl in line on that knot. And you've made it small and tight and it's in the right place. And I know it's in the right place. I already did, but you see it doesn't move around. So that's... Sometimes, Lori, it's either better to redo it or decide that's a great spot for an asymmetrical charm. All right, so again, I'm going to make a loop. I'm going to bring the working end up and over so it goes through the loop. So I've tied my knot. Tweezers go right at the tips of the tweezers. I'm going to tighten my cord. When I can't tighten it anymore, I'm going to skip the step where I pick it up and look at it because I know it's in the right place already. So a lot of times I will just actually push it to tighten it as I bring it off my pearls. Another thing that we do, hey Silvern, excellent. I will not acknowledge your presence. But another thing that we do when we are teaching knotting is we do not use perfect pearls. Because if you use less perfect pearls, then they are much more forgiving if you tie a knot in slightly the wrong place. If it's in really, really the wrong place, that's a different problem. That definitely is an issue. But if you're using slightly Baroque pearls that maybe aren't the exact same size and shape, that's going to give you a little advantage on your learning, because you're not going to... Yes, the other end just hangs out forgotten for now. So use irregular pearls because they're cool, and also because it is very easy to camouflage mistakes with them. So as you can see, these are knotting up very quickly because they're big pearls, so I'm not tying that many knots. So if you are knotting a bracelet, and I do recommend bracelets for learning because you have more opportunity to do the starting and finishing, which is just as hard as the middle bits. And by hard, I just mean tricky. Like, you will make mistakes, and it is good to make mistakes. I always tell my students when I'm teaching knotting, try to make all the mistakes you can while you're here in class so I can teach you how to fix them. Because I was a person who, for example, when I learned to knit, I did everything perfectly. My tension was great. Everything was perfect. I was doing so well. And then I went home to continue knitting and was having such a good time. I started a new project. I knitted a dishcloth. I knitted another dishcloth. I went to knit a third dishcloth, and my needle fell out. And I had a really good book that I was using as a reference, but my brain could not get around the instructions for putting the needle back in. So I just had to start over because there was no possible way I was fixing that mistake. And I was really sad when I moved out of Knoxville, which is where I learned to knit, because the yarn shop, my local LYS, my local yarn shop, was about to give a class, a 4-week class on fixing mistakes. And you had homework of knitting some pieces that were wrong so you could learn how to fix it. And I was all about that. And then I moved to Texas instead. So maybe someday a local yarn shop closer to me will teach that class, because I thought that was an absolutely genius class to teach. All right, so I did say that I was going to come back to this, where when you're tying a knot, you don't want the end of your cord hanging off the table. And the reason for that is because your cord doesn't seem like it has a lot of mass to it, but it can pull your knot just enough while you're doing this to tighten it without your cooperation. Like, it just does what it wants. And we don't really have all that many times in our lives when we can get a little bit of a leg up on gravity, because gravity is a cruel mistress indeed, or master. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Meant to do this, because it is definitely not in the right area of focus. I'm trying, but no, still not. Well, I did the best I could. I'm sorry, y'all. And yes, knotting is an automatic way to make things look more finished and more expensive. All right, so this, I think, is going to be my last pearl on here before the two that are specially drilled. And you'll notice I'm not tying a knot there. I am going to go ahead and string on the other two here. So now I'm going to have 3 in a row with no knots in between. And go through my bullion and through the other end of my clasp. But before I go through the other end of my clasp, before I finish this off and I'm done, I just want to double check that I can actually fasten the toggle, and it's difficult, but doable. So I was pretty sure I was going to have to cut this up after I finished anyway, but this is a good reason for me to do so, because this is not very easy to fasten. So you want to make sure, do a reality check before you actually finish a project, that it is usable. Because if I didn't check that and I finished this off and I handed it back to a customer and they're like, I can't wear this, this doesn't work, then they think we're stupid and all of my work that I've done is in vain. Obviously, it's too late to change the toggle right now, but it is a pair. Okay, but the thing is, when you put a toggle up next to beads, your toggle clasp has to fit with the beads that you're using. So if you have bigger beads like I do, you'll actually notice that this toggle clasp will go over the beads themselves. They will go through the middle. But the problem is that I'm asking the beads to go through and part of the toggle bar. And the toggle bar, as you can see here, doesn't have enough room because that bead is taking up the whole space that there is in the toggle loop. So you want to make sure that your toggle bar will go through when it is next to your beads. So if I'm finishing off a necklace, especially if it's strung, I will start with the toggle bar on and just test it before I actually do all the stringing and all that, and then have to redo things. All right, so before I get everything into place, I'm going to begin with the bullion, the French wire, just a little bit away from my pearls. And the reason for that is because in this instance, not in every instance, but in this instance for sure, it is small enough so it will go down into the hole of the pearl. And it is really difficult to fasten if it's inside the hole of the pearl. All right, so now I'm going to make sure that I am pulling gently because we want to make this loop work and we don't want to undo all the work that we've done. If there's a little bit of space here, don't worry about that because you've got 2 knots to tie, remember. So I'm going to pull that and tighten it so I have my bullion finished. And then I'm going to tie the same half hitch style knot. So I'm going to make a loop and pull the end through. Sorry, the end is long, so it requires more arm. And same thing again. If you have a tangle at this point, you are not going to worry about the tangle at the end. You only worry about what's going on here. So I've got my knot tied there. And now that I have 2 hands free, if you do have a tangle, now is the time that you are going to untangle it. Now I'm going to go back down through my next pearl. And this is when the silk is going to try to tie its own knot, because what we're essentially doing is we are pulling it like party ribbon, and it's kind of getting excited and wanting to make coils out of itself. I'm going to tie this one as well. All right, and I will be right back because I need some hypo cement. Talk amongst yourselves. Be right back. Sorry about that. I got all the other parts. So the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to finish by gluing my knots with hypo cement. So this is GS hypo cement. This is what we always use. There is a version for fiber, but we don't feel like we need a version for fiber because this works perfectly well. And it has a fine needle tip. You can see that it does come out on its own if you give it a few minutes or a few seconds. So you don't really need to squeeze the hypo cement. Squeezing the hypo cement is often what ends up in having a whole lot of hypo cement come out when you really don't need it to. So I did that, and I forgot that I hadn't tied the knot on the other side. Okay, so when you say you broke the needle tip off, did it just stick to the inside of the cap? Because if it did, then it is just a tube. So you can actually just get some pliers and grip it off of this part, because sometimes it'll go back down in here. Yeah, if it comes out, then all you have to do is stick it back in and it continues to work. So you still have that nice applicator there. All right, so I let that dry, and I will also say that sometimes when you are using, when you're doing a really, really fancy pearl piece, you actually don't want to tie a knot here with this cord on either end. What you can do is tie your usual knot and then come through, tie your knot here, and then just come back down here with your cord. So all that's going through the second bead is the end, so then you don't have any end sticking off. The reason I did not do that tonight is because the holes in these pearls are pretty big, which is great, makes it really easy, but it also means that that end might work its way out, and it was going to be difficult for me to tie a knot that didn't get partially eaten by the holes in the pearls. So you can, once again, just tie a regular knot under the second pearl and under the second to the last pearl, and then only use this end to pull through and cut off the end. But it's hard to see what I'm doing for that, so I made some choices. I made some executive decisions on what to do for this particular project. Now, when you are doing this kind of knotting, you want to make sure that you are going to let this dry for at least 10 minutes, because it doesn't take that long for the hypo to dry, but it definitely takes more than a couple of minutes. I am going to cut this apart, so it really doesn't matter, because again, remember that I wouldn't, because it's really pretty, but the toggle doesn't fit this loop with these pearls. The toggle fits the loop just fine, but it just needs more space between. I need a bigger loop on my toggle set. This is the correct size bar for this set, so this is a complete set. This is not the right size for these pearls. So choices were made, and that's okay. I wasn't aiming to do something necessarily, and it's good when, again, when I mess up, I can show you how to fix it. So while I am letting that dry, I'm going to tie a knot and show you how to get out a knot. So here's a knot that I've tied, but I haven't tightened it. So you can see it's in the wrong place because it's not next to anything. So we know that we want to get this one out. So you will use your awl and you will gently no, Keiko, that is a good solution, but I can't leave more space between the bar and the bead in this particular technique. It would have worked if this were strung, because there would be more space with the crimp bead and all that. It doesn't need a lot more space, it just needs a tiny bit. All right, so I'm going to just work the end of my awl gently into that knot. And you want to make sure that you are being very careful not to split your silk. Remember, this is a 2-ply silk. So what I'm aiming for is loosening my knot so that I can take it out with my tweezers. And notice I'm using the sides of the tweezers. And there goes the knot. But you'll also see that you can absolutely see where that knot was. So you see what I was talking about in the beginning, where the silk has a memory to it. And it is going to be hard if I tie this knot and try to go slightly off where I last tied it. That's an issue. So, and you can't, re-stretch it while you're in the middle of stringing, because if you re-stretch it, you're just going to add extra space that does not need to be there. Because pulling is only done when you stretch your silk or when you're tightening your knot at the end. All right, any other questions? Oh, thank you, Corvus. I like to make sure that things happen. And I didn't have a toggle bar that wouldn't fit on purpose, but I'm glad that I did, because that's an important lesson to learn. So I am actually very happy that that happened, even though it wasn't on purpose. All right, so when you are done, you've waited your time, you can just snip that end off. You see that you've got a little bit of a tail, so you can get a little closer, or you can just glue it just a little bit more. You want to do that on each end. And there you go. Finished bracelet I cannot wear because the ends don't work. Any questions? I hope that was informative for you. This is not really enough silk. I'm going to throw the rest of the silk away. And the reason for that is because it is enough. It's probably 3 feet, but it's about 2.5 feet. So you want to make sure that you have enough to hold onto on each end to stretch. And you do not want to hold the needle when you are pulling it to stretch, because this part right here is the most vulnerable part of your silk. And you can very easily accidentally break it. I didn't there, but I kind of wondered if I would. So you could do that, and you don't want to do that unless you're demonstrating at the end. And the other reason I don't want to string anything on this is because it is so fuzzy and so much bigger than the rest of the cord that if I'm going to knot, I can't actually get the right size hole on without potentially messing up my cord. Because this is probably a size 5.5 at least, if not a 6. And I need to be able to get a size 5 hole on here. And you can conceivably measure the millimeter size of your holes. And again, make note that on Griffin Silk, they do give you that number. So it's not just a size 5 is a meaningless number. It is a size 5 equals 0.65 millimeters. But you don't want to test it and find out that you're really, really wrong. Because especially on this particular type, when you're pulling back through, you you want your cord to have the best structural integrity possible. We are low on silks, which is part of why I'm recycling, but also I knew that the holes in these were plenty big enough for me to go back through and not rip the needle off. I have absolutely experienced times when I did rip the needle off trying to repair something, and it's not the most fun. I wouldn't recommend it for your playtime. I wouldn't even recommend it for your work time. It's just not fun. So thank you for being here. My name is Heather. I'm here from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. I'm the manager here. We are a brick and mortar retail bead store that does teach classes. We do sell beads. We have parties. Tomorrow night, we're actually going to be selling beads right here at Twitch TV/Beading Dream at 6:30 p.m. That's awesome. It is. That's great. So we'll have a live merchandise sale tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Central Time in the US. And if you have any requests, post them on Discord. Otherwise, we will pick some good stuff because we're pretty good at that, I think. Yay. And I am shipping things and trying to convince Boss Mom that she doesn't need to be the one to invoice because that's not going to go well. But we'll see. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting us throughout the pandemic and still. And we love you all so much. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow night for the sale. We will have another tutorial on Friday evening. And then we've got Social Saturday. I believe this is going to be Zoom week. So we'll have some, and the project for Friday is so stinking cute, you guys. I cannot with it. So I can't wait for you to see it and see Allison make one. Good night. Thank you so much.